So with the Infinity War, what we're going to find is that like the Infinity Gauntlet, we're going to be covering a lot of stuff in each individual video because these comics are chock full of information. Jim Starlin did quite a good job covering the events as they took place directly after the Infinity Gauntlet. And what we're going to find here is a mishmash of things. Most notably, we're actually going to find Thanos switching sides. And as this story begins to come to an end, what we're going to see is that an incredible ruse was done. An incredible trick took place with regards to the actions of Thanos and the main villain of this story. Well, what we see as we pick up with this is that, again, if you recall our discussion about the Infinity Gauntlet, we had talked about how once the event was over, that Thanos had relegated himself to a peaceful life. He had stepped away from his attempts to take over the universe and has simply just more or less gone into a reclusive nature. And so one of the things he had done is he had taken his previous garb and he had hoisted it up on a scarecrow of sorts. And so as we open this story, we see what appears to be another version of Thanos wearing the exact same outfit that he normally wears, approaching the home of the normal Thanos. And what we see here is that this duplicate of Thanos, this doppelganger, as we'll later figure out, is approaching the front door, and when he opens it, the real Thanos is of course standing inside analyzing some kind of a data pad. And when Thanos turns around to see who it is that's standing at the door, there's no one there. And so what he does is he walks outside to look around. But when he does, the doppelganger of Thanos is hiding behind a tree. And so from here, we pick up with the real Thanos. And Thanos is speaking with his computer while at the same time analyzing the information that's been given to him. And what the computer says is that the telemetry has been gained or has been accessed for whatever it is that Thanos is looking at. And the computer says that Thanos will most likely need to, examine the information that's been given before he actually travels to the location of whatever it is he's discovered. And so what we learn here is that there's some kind of trans-dimensional anomaly that's taken place out in space. There's something going on here that appears to be a rift of sorts between our dimension, the Earth 616 dimension, and another dimension somewhere else. But again, this is all just hypothetical stuff. Thanos doesn't really know exactly what's going on here. And so what the computer says is that it's launched a probe, and the probe is designed to travel towards this rift and presumably gain as much information and possibly even travel through the rift if it can. Now, what the computer says is that the probe will most likely be destroyed here, but Thanos says this is irrelevant. That the only thing that really matters here is that the probe is able to gather the information Thanos needs and transmit that information back. And the probe is successfully able to do that. And what Thanos tells us here is something very, very important. Thanos, of course, as we had seen in the Infinity Gauntlet, had wielded absolute power. And so there really were no mysteries with regards to the universe for him. And even after the Infinity Gauntlet event, going forward, very little is actually surprising to Thanos due to the time that he had wielded the Infinity Gauntlet. And so as Thanos is going over these readings, he comes across something that is very surprising to him. He says that he's never really seen any readings like this before, which indicates to us that whatever it is that's taking place here is beyond the scope of Thanos' understanding of the known universe, indicating this could very well be something that takes place in an alternate dimension that has somehow managed to pour into our universe. And so when the computer asks Thanos what conclusion he's come to, Thanos says there's only one conclusion he can draw, that conclusion being that the universe is in grave peril. And so we pick up with Thanos as he is switched out his garb, his monk-like uniform for his normal armor. And of course the computer asks whether or not on-site research is required here, and Thanos says yes. Thanos says that sometimes the only real way to understand what's going on with something is to actually travel to it and to investigate. And so the computer offers to reconstruct another one of the flyers that Thanos has. Of course, we had seen this flyer during the Infinity Gauntlet and the Thanos Quest stories. But Thanos, of course, tells us that the previous design had been destroyed, but that Thanos never really forgets any form of technology once he learns about it, which tells us that, of course, this ties into his intellect. And while the computer says that the previous flyer had some sort of mystical qualities, most likely given to Thanos by Mistress Death, Thanos says that this flyer lacks those mystical qualities, but that the purpose of the flyer will suffice, and that it will allow him to teleport throughout the cosmos and arrive at whatever this anomaly happens to be. And this is a very interesting part here. What the computer does is it asks Thanos whether or not he can provide any kind of ETA for when he'll get back. And Thanos says the question is not when he'll get back, the question is will he get back, indicating to us that what's taking place here may very well lead to the doom of Thanos, something that Thanos himself recognizes. consequences. And so from here, we switch to Peter Parker as he's traveling through New York. And as Peter Parker describes it to us, this is a pretty mundane night. There really isn't a whole lot going on here. But as Peter Parker is traversing through the city, we realize that Peter Parker is being watched. And Peter Parker is being watched by the Doppelganger. Now, for those of you guys who are relatively familiar with Spider-Man, albeit not in an in-depth way, but are familiar with the character of Doppelganger, but were curious about his origins, this is it. This is when the Doppelganger first shows up in Spider-Man comics through Infinity War issue number 1. This is the version of Spider-Man that is in effect exactly like him with regards to his physical appearance, with the exception of the fact that of course he has 6 arms and some claws and whatnot. But again, what we see is that as Spider-Man is going through the city, that this Doppelganger begins to follow Spider-Man. Now from here, we pick up with a very interesting development. What we learn here is that Galactus was apparently doing the exact same thing that Thanos was doing, that he was analyzing this trans-dimensional anomaly. But what Galactus has come across is a catatonic eternity, indicating to us that whatever power is in possession of whatever was able to create this trans-dimensional anomaly also has the same power that could place eternity in a catatonic state. And because eternity is the foremost authority, or I guess the foremost and most powerful being in the Earth 616 universe, it stands to reason that whatever it is that's going on here is a power that supersedes eternity, possibly indicating maybe the return of the Beyonder or something like that. We don't quite know what's going on here. And Galactus even goes as far as to say this. Galactus says, whatever power, whatever forces are about that have caused this are forces that cannot be allowed to continue unchecked. They're forces that cannot be allowed to continue unchallenged. Something has to step in the way of whatever these forces are and bring their reign to an end. Now, in addition to Galactus analyzing this, analyzing eternity in a catatonic state, we also see that Thanos has arrived. Now, whether or not Thanos and Galactus are aware of the other's presence is something we don't know. What we do know is that Thanos is analyzing the idea of eternity being in a catatonic state. And what Thanos says here is that the energy readings he's picking up are strangely familiar. They're energy readings that he recalls to a degree, but he can't touch on, which tells us, of course, that whatever energy readings these are not based on the Infinity Gauntlet. That surely, if these readings were based on someone who had somehow managed to defeat the Infinity Watch and capture all of their Infinity Gems, that Thanos would immediately recognize the signature, because this event takes place so closely after the events of the Infinity Gauntlet. And so again, as Thanos is examining eternity, as he's examining this situation, he notices out of the corner of his eye a version of himself that's standing on an asteroid, but a split second later, that version is gone. And this takes Thanos by surprise a little bit. Thanos really isn't sure what to make of this. And so from here, we switch to Tony Stark. And again, the one thing to keep in mind is that when it comes to the relationship between Tony Stark and Iron Man, at this point in the Marvel Comics, people don't know that Tony Stark is Iron Man. As far as they know, the story is still true that Iron Man is the bodyguard of Tony Stark. And so what we learn here is that Tony Stark had been spending the weekend in Las Vegas and presumably had created some kind of a ruse or some kind of a situation that allowed him to leave and to take on the role of Iron Man to go about making sure that things are safe, that he's able to travel back to his home and make sure that the city is in good standing. But before he's able to travel too much farther, his armor informs him that someone's locked onto him. And when he looks back, he realizes there's a doppelganger of himself that's chasing him. And this is what we're going to see in this comic. We're going to see doppelgangers of various characters encounter their originals, but we won't find out until later on why it is these doppelgangers are here or who it was that had created them. And so what we do is we switch back to Thanos. And at this point, it appears that Thanos has found a way to transcend, to enter the transdimensional rift and to actually see what's on the other side. And when he gets through this rift, he sees what appears to be a massive shrine of some kind. And indeed, Thanos says this shrine reminds him a lot of the shrine he had made for Mistress Death. And so this citadel of sorts is something that he likes, is something that he really enjoys due to the fact that it brings back great memories for him in terms of his affection for Mistress Death. Now from here, we pick up with Thanos as he gets to basically the front door of this citadel. And what Thanos tells us is that this front door doesn't have any kind of a sentry or any kind of automated, systems guarding it. And so Thanos comes to two conclusions here. The first conclusion is that this may very well be an abandoned outpost ghost, that somebody was here at one point, but they're not here anymore. But in a more dangerous situation, the second conclusion is that there may very well be somebody here, but because this person possesses a vast amount of energy, they're not concerned about anyone who would show up here because their power would allow them to eliminate this person entirely. But Thanos, because of his curiosity and because of the fact that he knows that a conclusion has to be created, or a conclusion has to be discovered regarding this whole thing, proceeds inside of the citadel. And when he does, he discovers what appears to be a massive gem, possibly a massive infinity gem that is being perhaps powered or else having its energies channeled by a giant piece of machinery. And so as Thanos is continuing to explore here, we pick up with Wolverine. And Wolverine is in nature. This is basically Wolverine's way of being able to meditate. It's his way of being able to come to grips with, I guess, coming into contact with his more primitive self. It allows him to really hone his skills in terms of his senses as well as his fighting prowess. But as he's moving about in nature, he comes across another doppelganger of himself. Now, this doppelganger is different from Wolverine in several ways, as we can see. Of course, this doppelganger is wearing different colored clothing. More notably, it doesn't have 3 adamantium claws, but instead has claws coming from its fingers. Now, we don't know whether or not this doppelganger actually has adamantium or whether it doesn't have adamantium. And if it did not have adamantium, it would make it very easy prey for Wolverine due to a combination of his healing factor and the indestructible metal that covers his bones. And so what we see is that the two of them begin to engage in combat with one another. And what we do is we switch back to Thanos as he's continuing to examine this gem. Now, Thanos' idea here is to perhaps take a piece of this gem and take it back to his base for some kind of investigation. But before he's actually able to do that, someone comes up from behind him and asks Thanos whether or not he truly intended to take a sample of this gem back to his home. When Thanos turns around, it seems as though Thanos recognizes who this person is by addressing them as you. And so what we do before we find out who this person is we jump to Doctor Doom. And Doctor Doom, again, like Galactus and Thanos, is examining this transdimensional rift, is examining this anomaly. And what he comes to the conclusion of is saying that whatever power it is that is based with this anomaly, whatever energy readings are emanating from this anomaly, is very similar to the same kind of energy readings that are usually controlled by a cosmic entity, telling us this is a vast amount of power. And so what Dr. Doom tells us here, what he says, is that while some individuals would look at this anomaly and be fearful, while they would be terrified of it, Dr. Doom looks at it and says this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for him, as he's tried so many times before, to gain absolute power. But what Dr. Doom says is that his ability to go further with his investigations, with his studies, is limited by the technology of his time, which is very interesting to us because Dr. Doom, as one of the most intelligent people on the planet, is very advanced in terms of his technology. And so what he says is that he's going to have to go to someone whose technological understanding is beyond his scope, or at the very least, the person's ability to access technology is beyond anything that he's capable of. And so what we do is we switch to Reed Richards, to Four Freedoms Plaza. And again, Reed Richards, like Dr. Doom and Thanos and Galactus, is examining this anomaly. And as he's examining this anomaly and going over these various readings, we see that some kind of a hand that appears to be a version of his own reaches up from behind him. And what we do is we switch to this conflict between the doppelganger of Reed Richards and Reed Richards himself. And this presents a very interesting conflict here because, again, because Reed Richards is able to stretch his body, because he's able to move various parts of his body in ways that normally aren't done, both the doppelganger and Reed Richards engage in this very snake-like kind of combat where they get so intertwined that we don't know who's who. We have no idea which hand belongs to which. But what we see is that one of the hands goes to reach for some kind of a laser gun and is able to pull the laser gun down, but another hand tries to stop this person from using the laser gun. So again, we don't know which hand this belongs to. Now the laser gun is fired and one of the Reed Richards is either killed or knocked unconscious. And what we see is that another version of the Reed Richards, the one who was able to come out on top in this conflict, has his back turned to us. So we don't know if this is the doppelganger Reed Richards or if this is the actual Reed Richards. And so what we do is we pick back up again with Thanos. And of course, what we see is that Thanos is conversing with this unknown individual, presumably the individual who's the person behind this transdimensional rift and the incapacitation of eternity. And what we learn here is that this person is the Magus, that the Magus, the evil counterpart of Adam Warlock, has returned to reality. Now, we don't know yet how this was done, and we actually won't find out until Infinity War issue number 2. But the Magus, again, is, as we previously talked about, the evil version of Adam Warlock, who seeks to take over this reality, to basically take all forces or all life in this reality, adapt them into the universal church of truth, and then force them into a position where they will worship him as a god. And so what he says here to Thanos is that Thanos probably didn't expect to see him again. Thanos probably didn't expect to see him at all. And so what we see is that, the Magus and Thanos begin talking to one another. And this is one of the interesting relationships between Thanos and the Magus. Despite the fact that at this point in time they have opposing ideologies, they have a lot of respect for one another to a degree due to the vast amount of power they possess, but because of the lengths they will go to achieve their own ends. Now, this respect is tentative at best, meaning that it is very fragile and it could come to an end at any time. But as they're talking, we of course see that the Magus references Mistress Death, about how Mistress Death had previously claimed Thanos as her own, as her partner to a degree, but that, of course, Thanos says that she had rejected him due to his actions with the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Gauntlet event. But again, what the Magus says here is that there's more than one way to come back from the dead. There's more than one way for him to reconstitute himself. Now, whether or not this means that the Magus knows how he came back to reality is something we don't know. What we'll find out in Infinity Gauntlet or Infinity War issue number 2 is how it was the Magus reconstituted himself, but it was actually a subconscious action by Adam Warlock. And so it may very well be the Magus had just popped up into existence and didn't know how he got here. But what we also see with Thanos is that he taunts the Magus a little bit, and referring to the Magus as the shadow of Adam Warlock, that Adam Warlock is the real person and the Magus is simply just a darker part of him, which to a degree is true on a more physical and philosophical level. But of course, this is one of the banes of the Magus. He hates being referred to as the shadow of Adam Warlock. And so what we see here is that we switch back to both Iron Man and Wolverine, as both of them are fighting their doppelgangers. And it seems as though they're both putting up a very good fight. They're doing the best they can to combat the copies of themselves, these twisted and mutilated versions of themselves. But ultimately, we see with this conflict that Wolverine appears to be the one that comes out on top with his doppelganger, but that ultimately Iron Man appears to be defeated by his. Now, we don't exactly know what the purpose is of these doppelgangers being here. Of course, with them being doppelgangers, normally they would take the place of the person they've defeated, which is the entire reason behind a doppelganger. But because this doppelganger is so different in terms of its physical appearance to Iron Man, there's no way that it could successfully replace Iron Man, at least not in terms of how it looks right now. But when Wolverine kills his doppelganger, another very interesting thing happens. Wolverine's doppelganger just disappears entirely, and so Wolverine begins to set off, but we don't know exactly where it is that he's going. Now from here, we switch back to Galactus, and Galactus, of course, is talking with Nova. Now this version of Nova is different from the one of Richard Rider. Richard Rider, of course, became Nova through the Nova Corps, and so on and so forth. This version of Nova is a herald of Galactus, and her name is Frankie, and she of course possesses power cosmic, the same powers to a degree that the Silver Surfer had, but she's able to manipulate her energies in the form of a physical flame that manifests itself as her hair. But she's talking with Galactus here. And Galactus, as he's explaining it to her, is analyzing this transdimensional rift, but the problem here is that he can't get past it. He can't penetrate this rift due to the fact that there are mystical properties that are guarding it. And so what he says is he's going to need the help of somebody else to get him past this rift. And that person, as it appears, is going to have to be Doctor Strange. And we get a little bit of a glimpse here with regards to Spider-Man. What we learn with Spider-Man is, of course, that he had encountered his doppelganger. He had, apparently had defeated his doppelganger. And the way that Spider-Man is reacting here in the form of appearing to be totally exhausted, that it was most likely a very in-depth conflict between the two of them. But from here we pick up with Iron Man, and what we learn is the whole purpose of these doppelgangers, that these doppelgangers are apparently defeating their counterparts and then they're replicating their bodies. Now what they do with the original bodies is something we don't know. We don't know what happened to the actual body of Tony Stark. It may very well be that the body of Tony Stark has been assimilated or has been absorbed into the body of the doppelganger, and that if this doppelganger is killed, that the body of Tony Stark will be spit back out. We don't really know what would happen at this point, but what we see is that once this doppelganger is able to effectively copy Tony Stark, that it'll go about the process of doing whatever it is that it was assigned to do. Now from here, we pick back up with Thanos again, and Thanos again is continuing to converse with the Warlock, or with the Magus, and is trying to find out what it is the Magus is doing, trying to understand what it is that the Magus is coming to. But what Thanos does is give us some very valuable insight into his mind, specifically after he had gained and been defeated with the Infinity Gauntlet. And what he tells the Magus is that the Magus is very disconcerting to Thanos, and the idea here is that the Magus is looking to possibly use whatever energies he's been able to attain to again try to take over the normal Earth 616 universe. And when the Magus asks why it is that Thanos thinks this, Thanos says the reason is because he looks at the Magus, and the Magus is already in possession of incredible power. He's able to manipulate the power cosmic. He basically has the same power as Adam Warlock, yet there's still a desire for conquest in the Magus's eyes. He still pursues more power, and in a lot of ways, the current mindset of the Magus reminds Thanos of himself when he was going after the Infinity Gauntlet. And so what we do is that as the two of them are going through, the Magus begins to realize what it is that's going on here with Thanos, that there's a difference here, that Thanos, as he appears now, is not the same kind of Thanos the Magus had previously encountered when the two of them had come into conflict before the Magus's timeline had been destroyed. The Magus refers to Thanos as a weaker version of himself. He says that Thanos doesn't really have the same edge that he used to, that Thanos' priorities are entirely different here. And of course, Thanos is not very receptive to this. He's a little irritated by this, but again, Thanos is trying to figure out what the motivations, what the attempts are, I guess the basis behind the Magus's actions are here. But as the Magus begins to understand what's going on, as he begins to pick up what it is that Thanos is trying to do here, he basically institutes, or I guess brings in, all these different versions, these different doppelgangers of superheroes that have apparently been created. Among these doppelgangers, we of course see most of the X-Men, we see X-Factor, we see Nova, Alpha Flight, pretty much all the individuals that we would expect to see among the most prominent groups in Marvel Comics at this time. And so one of the last things that the Magus tells Thanos is to let Adam Warlock know that he's coming, which is a very, very dire thing here. And the reason why is because if the Magus wants Warlock to know that he's going to be there, then the Magus must be capable of incredible feats, powers that are far beyond the scope of anything any of the superheroes on in the Earth 616 universe are able to utilize. And this is something Thanos recognizes. Thanos says that whatever it is that's taking place here, whatever the schemes are that that the Magus is getting into, are going to probably lead to the ruin of the entire universe. It's going to lead to the destruction of all. And so what he says is he can't do this on his own. He can't defeat the Magus on his own, that he's going to need help in winning this conflict. Now another thing that we see is that the doppelganger of Thanos is speaking with the Magus, and what this doppelganger is saying is that the telemetry, the destination that Thanos has set for itself, or set for himself, is exactly as the Magus had predicted, indicating that the Magus has been playing Thanos this entire time, or at the very least expects Thanos to follow a certain course of action, which is exactly what Thanos does. Now what we do from here as we switch to the Avengers headquarters. And when we get to the Avengers headquarters, we see that Reed Richards is calling a meeting among various superhero groups. Of course, he's calling the Avengers, he's calling the X-Men, and he's calling the New Warriors. And he's basically telling them all the same thing, that there was some kind of a doppelganger that had encountered him and that had tried to kill him, or presumably defeat him and most likely take over his physical body. Of course, he also says that whatever forces are at play here, whatever energy readings it is that he has picked up, are energy readings that are quite possibly on the same level or even greater than the powers of the Beyonder or the Infinity Gauntlet, which tells us that this is a massive amount of power. What we also see is that Reed Richards reaches out to the West Coast Avengers, to X-Factor, and to Alpha Flight, and he of course tells them pretty much the same thing. Of course, all these groups are watching this transmission at the same time. He's not going in sequence and speaking to each individual group, but what we have going on here is Reed Richards telling them they all need to come come to a meeting that he's created. They all need to meet up at Avengers, or I'm sorry, at For Freedom's Plaza, and they all need to basically talk about what's going on here. They need to converse about what's taking place. Now from here, we switch to Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange is of course in his Arcanum. He's going about whatever his normal actions are, meditating, but before he's able to meditate too much further, he's exposed to a blinding flash of light, and from here, we don't really know what happens with his character next, but what we do is we switch to Doctor Doom, and Doctor Doom is speaking with some unnamed individual. He's saying that, again, that the data that's been sent to this person should be sufficient incentive for this person to join Doctor Doom in his conquest. And what Doctor Doom says is that he would never go about the process of going along this endeavor by himself. He would never try to figure out what this is on his own due to the vast amount of power that is involved here. But he says that this person is the only one person that Doctor Doom can trust. But what he also says is that the two of them working together could be dangerous. It could be dangerous in the sense that people could see what they're doing and they would try to capture them. Or it could be that they may tap into a power that they can't control. But more so than that, and more importantly to Doctor Doom than that, the energy that he's detected here is something that's very important, something that can't be denied, because what it is it's the combination of 5 particular artifacts. Now, he doesn't tell us what these 5 artifacts are, but what he says is that one of them is enough power to lay waste to the entire universe, but 5 of them being combined into one massive power source is something that would allow Doctor Doom, along with this individual that he's speaking to implement their grand plans of taking over the entire universe and quite possibly other universes. And so what we learn here is that this person that Doctor Doom is talking to is Kang the Conqueror, who has traveled to the 20th century for the purpose of combining his efforts with Doctor Doom to allow the both of them to go about their plans of conquest. Now, what we also do is we switch to Monster Island, to the home of Mole Man, and what we have here is a scenario where the Infinity Watch has basically turned this place into a headquarters of sorts, but it's done with a very tenuous agreement with Mole Man. Now, we don't exactly know what the agreement was that was made between Mole Man and Warlock, but whatever this agreement was is of such degree that it allows Warlock and the Infinity Watch to use this place as a base of operations, but it also allows Mole Man to continue his schemes to a degree, to the sense that he's able to go about the process of maintaining his endeavors, but only insofar that it doesn't come into conflict with the actions of the Infinity Watch. But what we also find out here is that there's another person that's joined this group, and this person that's joined them is Thanos. Now, initially, the idea here may be, at least as far as the Infinity Watch is concerned, that Thanos has perhaps come by to seek retribution, that he may actually be here to try to capture their Infinity Gems. But what Thanos tells us here is that he's not here to fight any of them, that what he's here for is their help, indicating he is going to enlist the aid of the Infinity Watch to help him defeat the Magus. With that being said, I will catch you guys later. Peace.